Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon, Friday afternoon. Who thought it was a good idea to schedule a workshop on a Friday afternoon? I guess that would, I'll blame myself for that one. So thank you all for joining us today to talk about the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. This is going to be our last scheduled workshop for this program for cycle 3. I seen Naveen on actually, but I was going to say we are not at maybe like 30% of our expected attendance. So we'll go ahead and wait until about 3 minutes after, and then we'll start the workshop. So we'll see you all shortly.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2022 Solutions for Congested Corridors program. My name is Naveen Habib. I am the manager of the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, and I think it's 1:04, so we're just going to go ahead and get started as some of you are still logging in. Okay, so again, I am Naveen Habib. I manage this program, and I'm joined by Matthew Yoscott, Deputy Director of SB1 Programming, to cover today's workshop. You will hear us refer to the program interchangeably as program and SCCP through the course of this workshop. As a reminder, anytime we state we or us, we are referring to commission staff. We also have additional members of our team joining us today to help moderate this workshop. This includes Kayla Giese, Celeste Aceves, and Cherry Zamora. In these workshops, we plan to review and amend program guidelines to prepare for the next program cycle, which is cycle 3. These guidelines govern how the program will be implemented, facilitated, and reported on, as well as how funds will be distributed to reimburse agencies for expenditures. And finally, as a reminder, all proposed changes or recommendations to the guidelines can be seen in the image captures of the draft 2022 guidelines or in bold yellow font on the corresponding slides. Before we get started, I will share a quick refresher about the program, which was established in 2017's landmark legislation, Senate Bill 1. $250 million are appropriated annually from the state highway account to provide funding to regional transportation planning agencies, county transportation commissions, and Caltrans to reduce congestion throughout the state. The program is currently on its second cycle, covering fiscal years 2021-22 to 2022-23, with 7 projects programmed for $500 million in funding and total project cost valued at $2.6 billion. With that, I'm going to move on to some housekeeping items. Kayla, please walk us through the GoToWebinar logistics, please.
Thanks, Naveen. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Our workshops normally take place in different locations around the state. However, containment measures surrounding COVID-19 have required us to adjust to a webinar format. Please bear with us should we encounter any technical challenges. The workshop agenda is located under the Handouts tab and can be downloaded and saved during the webinar. It can also be found on the Commission's website. For participants joining us through GoToWebinar, please find the webinar panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will find the audio question and handout tabs. Under the audio tab, you have the choice to listen in via the computer or telephone option. If you prefer computer audio, please select the appropriate box. If you prefer the phone call option, select the corresponding box and dial the phone number, access code, and audio PIN as directed by the automated system. Please note that if the audio PIN is not entered, you will remain in listen-only mode and will be unable to speak should you have a comment. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access the webinar. These cannot be shared with other participants as they are registered to a specific attendee. We welcome comments and questions from attendees as a part of each topic at this workshop. There will also be an opportunity for comments and questions at the end of the presentation. There are two options for participants to provide comments. You may click on the hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment. You will then be unmuted and called upon to make your comment. Please be sure to state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. Also, please use the raise hand features early on into a topic as you can to give the system time to acknowledge you. If you raise your hand to speak, please do not lower your hand until you are done making your comment. This helps us ensure that you can be unmuted properly. You may also use the questions tab to submit a question or comment. Please type in the topic you are commenting on and your comment. Commission staff will read the comment on your behalf. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Back to you, Naveen.
Thank you, Kayla. If you have joined us previously, you may be aware that agendas are posted up to 10 calendar days in advance of each workshop. Presentations and recordings are posted after each workshop. We also email any key decisions made during a workshop to all attendees following that workshop. We will make recommendations based on the consensus reached throughout roughly 2 workshops. For timeliness, additional time on any topic may be limited to ensure all scheduled topics are covered during the allotted time for any given workshop. Similarly, previously covered topics may not be readdressed at subsequent workshops unless determined necessary. Finally, as a reminder to all attendees, if you plan to make a comment or ask a question, please clearly state your name and your organization's name. You may raise your hand or add a comment at any point during today's presentation, and we will ensure that all comments are addressed as received. I will add on that if you don't feel comfortable making a comment publicly during the workshop or in the comments section, or you think of something later on, you can always email us and we'll share the contact information later in the workshop. Okay, so if we can move on to the next slide. I'm going to walk us through some previous workshops from September 2021 to March 2022, where we covered, next slide please, lessons learned from the previous 2 program cycles, an overview of proposed technical changes to draft guidelines, funding restrictions, changes to the land use efficiency evaluation criterion, the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA, and National Environmental Policy Act, also known as NEPA, requirements, and the 2022 SB1 Technical Performance Measurement Methodology Guidebook, also known as the Performance Metrics Guidebook. Sorry, Friday slip up, I guess. We also discussed programming 2 years of funding for cycle 3, which would cover fiscal years 2023-24 to 2024-25 with a $500 million funding capacity. And if we move to the next slide, we also covered proposed changes that were incorporated into the red line draft of the 2022 SCCP guidelines. All proposed changes were where we reached consensus during previous workshops were added to these draft guidelines. These changes are denoted in red ink and bolded, as you can see in the capture on this slide, and all deleted language is struck out in red ink. In addition to the proposed changes, I addressed several non-substantive changes that were made to the draft 2022 SCCP guidelines as well. These changes included clarifying existing language, adding additional examples or context, and reordering or reorganizing sections for further clarity. One minor addition that we proposed was the project prioritization language under project rating process in section 16 on page 13, as you can see on this slide in bold red ink. This language was in line with previous discussions about the overall evaluation of projects and reiterated existing language embedded in the framework of the 2020 guidelines as well. the consideration of the advancement of the state's climate goal is the only added value for project prioritization, which is not explicitly enumerated in the SCCP statute. And it is included for consistency as we are incorporating CAPTI strategies into the 2022 program guidelines. Another update we highlighted was renaming primary evaluation criteria to congestion evaluation criteria, and renaming and combining secondary evaluation criteria and deliverability evaluation criteria into additional evaluation criteria. We believe this minor adjustment of the evaluation criteria better suits the significance of each criterion during the evaluation process. We will also reiterate that congestion evaluation criteria, which was previously primary evaluation criteria, is still the focal point of consideration when projects are evaluated, because it represents the program's primary objective to fund effective solutions to congested corridors throughout the state. We hope that these adjustments will make the guidelines easier to follow and understand. If you have any suggestions for additional changes, feel free to raise your hand, add a comment in the comment box, or contact us after the workshop to share your feedback. This now concludes the recap of the last 5 workshops, which took place in September, October, and November of 2021, and January and March of 2022, respectively. As you may recall, the December 2021 workshop was repurposed into an all SB1 competitive programs workshop to incorporate transportation equity, and the February 2022 workshop was repurposed into a 2-hour open office hour session with our stakeholders. I will now turn it over to Matthew Yoscott, who is the Director of SB1 Programs, to provide a recap of all SB1 competitive programs workshop on incorporating transportation equity, which took place in December. I'm sorry, not December, just this past week on April 11th, 2022. Over to you, Matthew.
Thanks, Naveen. Wow, yeah, that was a lot. We've covered a lot of ground in the Solutions for Congested Corridors program in our development of Cycle 3. So as Naveen mentioned, one of the major initiatives that the Commission has taken on this cycle in all 3 of our competitive programs is to better incorporate transportation equity into our guidelines to promote more equitable outcomes through projects as well as within project selection. Back in December, we started the process to develop this language by having kind of a first round workshop, if you will, where we invited stakeholders to provide us feedback and answer some questions that we were using to gauge and take a temperature on, what are the best practices and what are the right ways to amend our program guidelines so that we're heading in the right direction in our competitive programs. Over the course of a couple months, we developed that language in close collaboration with the Commission's Equity Advisory Roundtable, as well as each of our stakeholders who participated in that first workshop. And as Naveen mentioned, just this past Monday, so a few days ago on April 11th, we held our second workshop on better incorporating transportation equity into our programs, where we actually did lay out and provide some draft language to the program guidelines. I'll recover the language that we proposed for congested corridors here in just shortly, as well as use of a transportation equity supplement to the SB1 competitive programs. So as you can see on this slide, we suggested changes in congested corridors to the accessibility evaluation criteria, as well as the economic development evaluation criteria. We recommended adding in new evaluation criteria, which we're calling community engagement. And we also, as I mentioned, are bringing in a new tool, kind of a reference, if you will, which we're calling the SB1 Competitive Program Transportation Equity Supplement, which should be used as a guide for how applicants will respond to the community engagement evaluation criteria or any other evaluation criteria by which they're trying to demonstrate that they've done due diligence in addressing the needs of disadvantaged communities and historically impacted and marginalized communities in those regions. And so today, actually, I'll be sharing some revisions that we made to the supplement based on comments that we received at Monday's workshop. to reflect, I think, some items that we heard from several RTPAs, and these were comments that we heard along the way, and we vetted them internally and determined to make some changes. So Kayla, we can move on to the next slide and I'll cover some of the language. So if you participated in our workshop on Monday, might be a bit redundant, so bear with me. And I'm not planning on reading everything that you see on the page here, but we do want to, specifically pinpoint that we made changes to the accessibility criteria and the economic development, job creation, and retention criteria, which are specifically in the SCCP guidelines on page 14 and 15, and the evaluation criteria. We've lengthened what we're looking for to determine, if disadvantaged and historically impacted and marginalized communities will be a benefit to accessibility and the economic development criteria in particular. So we're proposing those changes this cycle. And Kayla, we can move on to the next slide. In this one, there's a lot of words on the page, and I'll refer you to the draft 2022 guidelines. This can be found on page 15, but this is the new evaluation criteria around community engagement. And without, again, reading the specific words on the page, because we did cover this on Monday, I want to highlight that this is a new evaluation criteria in cycle 3 for this program. We did consider community outreach and engagement, I would say qualitatively in cycle 2, but it was not an evaluated criteria. And so we are now going to evaluate this as a criteria, and we're taking it a bit further. So the two main components of this criteria will be, one, to identify those communities which I've stated, disadvantaged and historically impacted and marginalized within the project study area. So to identify those communities that will be impacted by this project and explain how that community has been engaged or how the community has been engaged. But then the second part to this criteria is to identify actions which were taken to protect that population and strategies that were included in the project scope as a result of the feedback that was received. So this is kind of a two-part evaluation criteria that we feel will allow us to assess, the types of outcomes that projects will be committing to this particular population. So I'll stop there very briefly. Again, I know we shared this information at our workshop on Monday, and we posted it publicly last week. So I'm hoping if there's not any comments or questions, it's because everybody had their concerns or their questions addressed in Monday's workshop. But not seeing any hands raised or any comments in the queue, we can proceed. So these are the two revisions that we made to the equity supplement based on the feedback we received on Monday. And I apologize, it's a bit hard to read, or at least it is for me. So I will summarize what you see here. So in the equity supplement, we have a section that's titled Example Indicators Used to Identify Disadvantaged or Historically Impacted and Marginalized Groups. You can also refer to this language in the attachment in the handouts tab. I believe it's the last handout. It's the last attachment in the handouts tab. And so we brought in a regional definition to be considered in terms of as an indicator used to identify disadvantaged or historically impacted and marginalized groups, which was recommended by a group of our stakeholders who have taken tremendous efforts within their regions to I think, work on identifying communities that are specific to their region, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to reflect on that, through this added language. And then it was also brought to our attention that it might be useful to also identify what the United States Department of Transportation references in their discretionary programs, which is what they refer to as areas of persistent poverty in historically disadvantaged communities, which we are linking there. And this is being included in the other category under the example indicators. And this is simply because we understand that, especially with the abundance of federal funding opportunities that are upon us, we wanted to provide an opportunity to maybe link some of the work that's being done on those funding opportunities and be a bit more consistent with what the feds might consider in this criteria. So just, again, this is just being provided as an example way to utilize as an indicator, but I'm seeing some hands raised and questions come in the queue. So happy to go over to, I think we do hands raised first.
Thanks, Matthew. Sarkis Kachek, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Sarkis Kachek, Santa Barbara County Association of Governments. Thank you, Matthew. And thank you for including this in the equity supplement. We really appreciate it and support the inclusion.
Thanks, Sarkis.
Hi, Matthew. I think that's all we have for hands raised, and no questions currently coming in.
Okay. Well, I think, unless there are any other comments or questions, I'm assuming, maybe we have a more limited attendance because we're having a workshop on a Friday afternoon. So again, I do apologize for that. But as you all know, we're happy to take any suggestions or comments outside of the workshop forum as well. But in terms of us discussing, these additions to this program, we're going to, treat these as, as incorporated into our draft, and they will be brought to the commission at the June CTC meeting. So with that, unless I don't know if that question is for me that I see in the queue, I will turn it back over to Naveen unless Kayla tells me it's for me.
Hi, Matthew. No, I think we're good. We did get some support really quick, just a comment from Denise at OCTA. She said, thanks, Matthew, for responding to our comments and concerns. And then it does look like we're having an issue with one of the links in the handouts, so we'll try to get that fixed. And otherwise, we will have these documents on our website, hopefully by early next week. So if you aren't able to access them today for some reason, just keep an eye out on our website next week, and they should be working.
Yeah, and Kayla, to that point, I'll say the workshops tab or the workshops website on the commission site has all of our materials and references from Monday's workshop. I guess since it's in the past, you'll now have to go to the bottom of the workshops page, but we have the proposed language for SCCP guidelines linked there. We have the proposed supplement linked there. And we also have a recording of Monday's workshop, which I probably should have started with if anybody's interested in going back. I don't think, the workshop might have lasted about an hour and a half. So with that, I will happily turn it back over to Naveen.
Thanks, Matthew. So this concludes the recap segment of today's workshop. Kayla, if there are no additional questions or comments, I think we can move on to agenda review. Okay, so in today's workshop, we will cover comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, also known as CMCPs, with members of our planning team, address new information areas and the air quality and greenhouse gases evaluation criterion with the California Air Resources Board, provide an overview of the updated project nominations appendix, and summarize all the new guidelines additions that have been made since the March workshop. In the navigational bar on the right and GoToWebinar, reference documents are included as attachments for your convenience. We apologize, not sure what's going on with the links, but hopefully they'll update while we're doing this or after, so you can access all the reference documents. Again, the reference documents included in the workshop agenda are the agenda, the 2020 SCCP guidelines, the 2018 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plans guidelines, and the draft 2022 SCCP guidelines, which are the red line edits and are the April version of those draft guidelines. So before I move forward, Kayla, are there any questions or comments?
Hi, Naveen. No hands raised at the moment and no written questions or comments.
Okay, so I am going to move on to the first item on the agenda. And at this time, I would like to welcome Assistant Deputy Director Bridget Driller to present the updates to the CMCP requirements in the 2022 SCCP guidelines.
Great, thank you, Naveen. I think we can go to the next slide. So good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting on the topic of comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, also known as CMCPs. As a brief refresher, SB1 required that projects receiving funding in the Solutions for Congested Corridors program be included in a comprehensive corridor plan. In 2018, the Commission adopted the CMCP guidelines that you see here, and these provide guidance on the development of CMCPs. Next slide. So next, I'll go over how Commission staff proposes to consider CMCPs in Cycle 3. As was signaled in the Cycle 2 guidelines and previous workshops, and consistent with CAPDI, it will be a requirement for Cycle 3 that all projects nominated for SCCP be included in a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan that is prepared consistent with the Commission's CMCP guidelines. We will require that applicants self-certify that the CMCP they plan to use for purposes of eligibility is consistent with the spirit and intent of the Commission's CMCP guidelines. We have developed a self-certification form that is included in Appendix B of the draft guidelines, and I will go over that in the next slide. So Kayla, you can go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay, so you probably can't read the small print there, but hopefully you can link up with the materials. Basically, this is a preview of the CMCP self-certification form. So applicants should indicate whether the key elements listed in the table here are included in the CMCP and where they are listed. These key elements are derived from Section 9.2 of the Commission's CMCP guidelines, which is the section on key elements of a CMCP. Commission staff will review the completed forms during the evaluation process to verify that the information in the forms is accurate. And this process will provide us with more data for the next cycle to understand the current state of CMCPs and whether future cycles should assign more stringent eligibility requirements. Lastly, while we hope that CMCPs will contain all or most of these key elements, we are not requiring for this cycle that CMCPs must include all key elements to demonstrate eligibility. With that, that concludes my presentation. At this time, I'd be happy to take any questions. Kayla, I'm not sure if you are seeing any questions yet.
Hi, Bridget. Yes, we did receive a question/comment.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Melanie Areola. It's a little lengthy, so bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of preparing a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan can range approximately between $2 to $4 million. This is a significant cost for a plan and is cost prohibitive to mid and small regional planning agencies. Are there other state grant programs that can fund the development of CMCPs and sufficiently? To level the playing field for small and mid-size MPOs/RTPAs, we request that the CTC identify a way to fund the development of the multimodal corridor plans so that the limited available funding to advance their projects can be competitively sought by all and not just the larger MPOs.
Thanks, Kayla. I'll respond to that comment, and thanks, Melanie, for typing that in. We are aware that it is costly to prepare corridor plans and to update them. It is a requirement in statute, so we do not have any plans to waive the requirement. However, I think that's a great suggestion to provide resources for how these plans can be funded. One pot of money that comes to mind is Caltrans's Sustainable Transportation Planning Grants, which I think could fund that type of planning work. But I'm sure that's not the only option. So that's something that we can look into and maybe provide on our website.
Thanks, Bridget. It looks like we don't have any hands raised at the moment and no more questions or comments.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kayla. I'll stay on if anything comes up, but I will turn off my camera and I think we can, I can throw it back to Naveen.
Thank you, Bridget. We are going to move on to the next item on our agenda. So Commission staff has been working with the California Air Resources Board to incorporate additional CAPTI strategies identified for implementation in the SCCP. I will now introduce Josh Rosa from the California Air Resources Board to present their recommendations for the 2022 SCCP guidelines. Josh, you with us?
I think I'm with you.
You are with us. We can see you.
Right. It worked. Well, thank you so much. And let me see if I can get myself together here. This is Josh Rosa with the California Air Resources Board, giving a presentation on some of the metrics that we're proposing for Cycle 3 and the approach that CARB would take to exercising our role, helping to review air quality and greenhouse gas benefits of projects. Next slide, please. So for Cycle 3, CARB has been working with CTC to develop quantitative and qualitative metrics to help measure strategies which CAPTI has identified for implementation in SCCP. And I imagine that folks at this workshop are familiar with CAPTI. It's the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure. And today I'll talk about first the new criteria that we're proposing, and next I'll provide information about how CARB will exercise its role in helping to review SCCP applications. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we're proposing some new criteria to implement key parts of CAPTI. CAPTI requires supporting zero emission vehicle deployment and incentivizing climate adaptation and land conservation through transportation programs. The proposed language we'll talk about today is designed to measure progress of those CAPTI strategies. A side note is you might recall CAPTI also requires additional strategies for SCCP, which were already addressed and discussed and incorporated into the draft guidelines in SCCP's October workshop and November workshop. So these include allowing travelers to opt out of congestion and requiring the multimodal corridor plans that Bridget was just presenting about. So that's separate from this. For today's workshop, we're talking about proposed criteria addressing the CAPTI strategies for zero emission vehicle deployment, adaptation, and land conservation. So I think that folks have probably seen that CAPTI organizes its strategies as short-term and medium-term. So for the short-term items, we're proposing evaluated criteria. And for the medium-term items, we're proposing non-evaluated criteria for this cycle, since we have time to more gradually ease into those strategies. Next slide, please. So the proposed new evaluated criteria for air quality and greenhouse gas benefits are designed to measure the progress of CAPTI's strategy for supporting zero emission vehicle deployment in transit. Because this CAPTI strategy is established as short-term, these additions would be evaluated criteria this cycle. These evaluated criteria provide guidance and optionality and examples of what zero emission vehicle investments can look like as an air quality benefit or greenhouse gas benefit. And potential strategies may include improving access to zero emission vehicle charging or hydrogen fueling infrastructure, and the deployment of zero emission equipment and vehicles. Next slide, please. So the proposed language offers some examples of what this could look like. And so this is just a list of examples, and what you're seeing on this slide closely mirrors what we're proposing in the draft guidelines that you have that are linked. And so those are the proposed evaluated criteria. Next slide, please. So moving on to the non-evaluated criteria, the appendix in the draft guidelines called Other Optional Project Information Areas lists proposed non-evaluated criteria. And these criteria invite project applicants to provide additional information about benefits of their projects in several specified areas, which are climate adaptation and resilience and conservation of natural and working lands. These non-evaluated criteria will likely become evaluated criteria in cycle 4 in order to implement the medium-term CAPTI strategies. Next slide, please. So climate adaptation. The proposed non-evaluated criteria would ask how projects are considering climate change impacts. And this can include identifying project features or strategies to adapt, to prepare for disruptions, to recover from shocks, or to adapt to climate impacts. The proposed language offers 10 examples of how projects could do this. We've listed some of them on this slide here, but this language presents an open-ended question, inviting applications through their narratives to provide explanations which don't need to be limited to these examples. While we are proposing this as a non-evaluated criterion in cycle 3, we understand the Commission will explore moving it into an evaluated criterion in cycle 4. Next slide, please. Land conservation. The proposed non-evaluated criteria here would also ask how projects are minimizing impacts on natural or working lands, or integrating natural or green infrastructure solutions into their design. This can include preserving habitat, providing wildlife crossings, or investing in green spaces or tree planting, among other actions. As with the adaptation criterion, this proposed language would offer examples of how projects could do this, but the language presents an open-ended question. And we invite narratives in the application that don't have to be limited to these examples. And while we're proposing this as a non-evaluated criterion in cycle 3, as with the adaptation criterion, we understand the Commission will explore moving it into an evaluated criterion in cycle 4. Next slide, please. Finally, the proposed language includes some other related guidance and clarifying language in the following areas. First, it would clarify that projects must be consistent with the Sustainable Community Strategy where applicable in the purpose section. Second, it would add shared mobility projects to the guidelines list of eligible projects. And this refers to projects that enable services like bike share, scooter share, microtransit, or other similar new mobility services that create alternatives to auto use. And finally, in the project rating process section, the proposed language identifies zero emission vehicle infrastructure as an example of an innovative solution likely to be among the highest rated nominations. Next slide, please. Okay, so those were the proposed new criteria. And now we'll talk about CARB's approach to reviewing applications. In our review of applications, CARB will be advising CTC on the air quality and greenhouse gas related benefits of each project. As possible benefits, CARB in cycle 3 would review applications for emissions reductions, VMT impacts, and zero emission technology deployment. VMT and the speed at which it travels is an input into all air quality and greenhouse gas emissions calculations. And VMT is positively impacted by things like increasing multimodal options like transit and active transportation. We'll review applications to ensure consistency between the reported air quality benefits and greenhouse gas benefits and the project scope. Next slide, please. So regarding emissions reductions, CARB will take the same approach that CARB used in previous cycles. This approach uses the CalBC life cycle benefit cost analysis to look at greenhouse gas emissions reductions, the cost effectiveness of those reductions, and finally, the other air pollutant reductions. CTC's SB1 Performance Metrics Guidebook that was presented in the last workshop gives some really useful guidance in how to use CalBC for anyone who may benefit from that guidance. And please note that for CalBC data and assumptions, applicants must provide an electronic copy of the completed Excel workbook as part of the application. If applicants modify the CalBC model, which happens sometimes, they must also submit supporting justification and supporting documentation regarding any of those modifications. Next slide, please. Okay, so as previous SCCP workshops addressed, the cycle 3 guidelines would expand upon the VMT aspect of the congestion evaluation criteria. And this includes asking, will the project reduce or minimize VMT while maximizing person throughput? And if so, how? Applicants have numerous options when describing how the project considers VMT. For example, does the project consider induced VMT, high occupancy vehicle lanes or high occupancy toll lanes, public transportation, or alternatives to highway expansion? And how does the project impact single occupancy vehicle miles traveled? And these are just some potential prompts which may be used for addressing VMT impacts in the narrative sections. Next slide, please. So CARB will use a handful of metrics to review the VMT related benefit, and those are listed here. First, there's change in average daily traffic, or VMT. Also change in the number of general traffic lanes and high occupancy vehicle lanes, or high occupancy toll lanes. And then as a narrative question, does the project consider alternatives to highway capacity expansion? That might include providing multimodal options or supporting public transit, using pricing strategies, or for example, using technology to optimize operations. Another narrative question, I'm just working my way down the list here, is does the project include an active transportation or micromobility component? And then finally, there's change in average vehicle occupancy, there's change in annual person trips for rail and transit, change in annual person trips, oh, I said that part. Per annual vehicle miles for rail and transit. And as you can see, most of these methods can be informed by CalBC and a few of them by narrative. Next slide, please. And then finally, looking at the zero emission technology side of it, CARB will evaluate applicants' narrative. A good way to provide this narrative is to structure it around some key questions. Does the project support zero emission vehicle deployment by building zero emission infrastructure? Does the project include or improve access to zero emission charging or fueling infrastructure? Or, of course, is there any purchase of zero emission vehicles or zero emission infrastructure? Next slide, please. Oh, and that's it. That's the presentation. I want to thank CTC staff for the opportunity to present these changes today. And with that, I'm happy to help with any questions.
Hi, Josh. We do have one written question that we received for you. So this is from Zoe Unra. Will there be an increased page limit in order to allow adequate space to respond to these expanded criteria?
Hey, Kayla, I think that's actually a question for us.
Sorry, Josh.
No, it's okay. I saw that question and this came up before. I believe this cycle, we still have a 35-page limit, without considering, so we're asking that applicants limit their nominations to 35 pages. But that would not be inclusive of all the information that's needed in the appendices. So that would be like performance measures, CalBC outputs, so on and so forth. All this to say, yeah, Zoe, I think we need to reconsider the 35-page limit. And so I just wanted to jump in here because I didn't want Josh to have to respond on our behalf for that one. So we'll take a look at it and I just want to throw out, I probably shouldn't admit this. We've had page limits every cycle. For the most part, our applicants abide by them. And in some instances, applicants have not abided by them. And I can tell you right now, we try to make sure we read everything, even if it's beyond the page limit. And we haven't, screened applicants out because they gave us too long of a nomination. So with that said, I think we should take a look at the page limit and revise it. So that's a long-winded response, but we've heard that comment before. So thanks for that feedback. I'll turn it back over to any questions for Josh.
Thanks, Matthew. Josh, we might have one more question for you. We do have a hand raised, so I'll turn it to Celeste to take care of that.
Thanks, Kayla. Starkus Kachek, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Hi, Josh. Yes, the question is for you. Can we go back to the prior slide, please? I just wanted to confirm the third bullet, the purchase of zero emission equipment. That means that could be either for transit or for lower medium heavy duty vehicles. Is that correct?
Yeah, Matthew, jump in if I'm wrong here, but yeah, that's correct. It could be for either one.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I don't see any more hands raised, and we don't have any written questions regarding your presentation right now.
All right, thank you much.
Thank you for your presentation, Josh. Next, we will move on to discuss the project nominations in Appendix A. If you are following along in the draft 2022 guidelines redline edits, this will be page 24 of the document, or if you can't access it now, again, it will be page 24 of the document, and this presentation will be up there so you can reference it as well. On to the next slide. So one of the more noticeable changes you will see in the 2022 guidelines is that all attachments have been reorganized as appendices, roughly in the order that you will need to complete the nomination, as seen on this slide in the image capture on the top left. There are several new additions in the form of appendices B, E, and F. And while the remaining appendices have newer or updated language, especially Appendix A, which I think Matthew sort of touched on a little bit in his response to Zoe earlier. So specifically in Appendix A, the submission requirements have been updated to require only one electronic submission instead of bound and mailed copies. This change was made to ease the submission burden for applicants and conserve resources, as well, with most of us still operating in remote work environments. Section B about the fact sheet requirements has also been updated to add more specificity for clarity. And finally, a new section was added, which is section I, and it is to allow applicants to share optional additional information about emerging areas in transportation planning and delivery. These include things such as climate resilience and adaptation, protection of natural and working lands, and public health. These new information areas were recommended additions to begin implementing CAPTI strategies and incorporating new emerging areas in California's transportation infrastructure policy into the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. While these new information areas are not considered evaluated criteria, they may be considered in the overall holistic review of the project. So Kayla, are there any questions or comments about this section at this time?
Hi, Naveen. No, not seeing any hands raised or questions and comments at the moment for this section.
Okay, before I move on, I think Denise just submitted a comment for Josh. So if he's still with us, maybe he can come back on and respond. Kayla, do you want to read the question?
Oh, there he is. Okay, so this is from Denise Arriaga. For the VMT analysis, would this be evaluated for individual project components or for a combined program of projects?
It would be evaluated based on the project nomination. So if it's one of those applications that includes a series of projects, then that would be the basis of the review. But it just depends on it would look at the overall application. Does that make sense?
Denise, if you need some clarification, feel free. Oh, she just wrote in and said, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Naveen and Josh, it looks like those are the only written questions we have right now regarding this section.
Awesome, great. Thanks so much, Josh. Oh, I think Josh cut off, but I think he said he'll stick around if anybody has any further questions or anything. Okay, so moving on to the next slide then, new guidelines additions. So if we can go to the next slide, thank you. We have made several changes to the 2022 guidelines since the last iteration was shared in the March workshop. As I did in our previous workshop in March, I'm going to summarize these key changes for your knowledge. You can also review the changes after the meeting, as all changes have been denoted with comments for ease of reference. When you pull open the PDF and you are scrolling down, you'll see like a tiny yellow bubble that pops up on each additional change. Those are the newer changes that we've added since March. So you'll be able to see them a bit more clearly. And you can also reference the presentation here if you want to match up what we discussed today. So on this first change on this slide is to section 5 on CMCPs, which Bridget Driller from our planning team discussed with you earlier in this workshop. As a reminder, the self-certification form Bridget reviewed with you can be found in Appendix B. And yeah, in the same PDF that I mentioned earlier, it'll be found in Appendix B. That's that self-certification form. So the next additions are to section 10 on eligible projects, where we have included several new projects that will be eligible to compete for SCCP funds. This includes the ZEV charging and infrastructure update Josh Rosa mentioned earlier as well. On the next slide, the first set of changes noted are related to integrating equity into the SCCP guidelines, which Matthew Yascott recapped with you earlier. Second is the update to the air quality and greenhouse gases additional evaluation criterion in section 17.2.5. We have amended section 19 on committed, uncommitted funds to include federal discretionary grants programs as an acceptable uncommitted fund source. We have also added a final new section to the guidelines, which is section 30 on Title VI requirements. This standard language is being added to the guidelines to prohibit discriminatory practices in compliance with federal regulations and the Commission's non-discrimination program. And finally, the last change that I'll address is the appendices, which I already discussed with you a few minutes ago. Again, they are at the end of that same PDF document with the draft 2022 guidelines, April edition. So Kayla, are there any questions or comments about this so far?
Hi, Naveen. It looks like we do have a hand raised, so
Okay.
I'll turn it to Celeste to take care of that.
Denise Arriaga, you are unmuted.
Yeah, just real quick. I know that that requirement for the ADA accessibility on the fact sheet carried over to this cycle. I just wanted to confirm that that's just for the fact sheet, correct? Not for the whole project nomination?
Yes, I believe you are correct in your understanding.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that is correct.
Thanks, Matthew.
Hi, Naveen. That's it for raised hands and no questions and comments at the moment.
Okay, so I did want to clarify one thing, which is that our additions to the eligible projects are not necessarily newly eligible. We're just calling them out. They've always been eligible, but I believe that there were some questions that are brought up in office hours and our discussions with different stakeholders. So we just thought we'd clarify them further. So that's that talking point from earlier. If there is nothing else, then I will move on to the next slide, to closing and next steps. Oh, I think did a comment just come in, Kayla?
It did, Naveen. We have a couple of general questions and comments, so if you want to take them now, we can, or I don't know if you want to wait till the end of your presentation.
Sure, let's just go ahead and do that. We're hitting closing and next steps, but let's go ahead and hit the general comments.
Okay, so the first one, Bridget is still on. So Bridget, this one is probably for you. So this is from Zoe Unruh. On the CMCP checklist, will there be a space allotted for responding to this checklist a bit more specifically, or at least clarifying the yes/no response?
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So we had thought about including that and ultimately took it out to reduce the burden on both you and us in reviewing. But if that would be helpful, that is something that we could consider. And it sounds like for your agency, you would see some value in doing that. So I guess I'd be curious to know if other agencies felt similarly.
Thanks, Bridget. I'm not seeing any comments come in quite yet, but I will read that. Oh, Zoe actually raised her hand, so we'll bring her off mute. Go ahead, Celeste.
Zoe, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me? Oh, great. I don't know that I'm having a hard time reading the checklist. So I'll wait to be able to see the whole attachment, but just in glancing at it, I thought it would be nice to maybe, perhaps not for each item, but maybe a general comment section at the bottom if there was a point that needed to be clarified or expanded on, just to have that opportunity. But I appreciate having a simple checklist that makes the whole process a little less onerous.
Thanks, Zoe. And I will discuss this further with Naveen and Matthew, and we'll consider putting that in the draft guidelines.
Okay, Naveen, we do have one more general comment. This is from Melanie Areola, and this is also a little lengthy, so bear with me. So they asked, or they said, general comment on CAPTI. We have projects that have been in the pipeline for some time. They have received significant support from Caltrans and CTC and others, and have received state and federal funding in the past to get through PA&ED, PS&E, and into construction for some phases. To be competitive under the new guidance, they will have to demonstrate alignment with CAPTI, but it is not always possible to modify a project that is already underway. But these projects are too far through the development process. Excuse me, I have to expand my screen. Let's see, too far through the development process without reopening environmental. Projects that have significant support and momentum and that will enhance transportation corridors in the valley should not be shut out from the state funding programs. What can be done to ensure that projects that have already been invested in and are far along in the developmental process can make it to the finish line.
Thanks for that comment, Melanie. I think Matthew's coming on, so maybe he'll want to respond to that.
This is a very important question. But Naveen, if I want to let you respond, and I can respond from more of a general standpoint.
Sure. I think I was just going to say that as our guidelines are today for the draft version of the 2022 SCCP guidelines, they don't preclude any of the existing projects from competing per se. A lot of the projects and the questions that we've received from the office hours would qualify under those same guidelines that we're proposing for the next cycle. But I do see where your concern is coming in with all of the changes that are on the horizon. And I think in that sense, I will punt to Matthew to go over like the larger policy segment of that particular issue.
Yeah, thanks, Naveen. And Melanie, we appreciate the comment. And I think it's one that we've heard along the way in cycle 3 development. And as you know or may not know, the commission was closely was closely paying attention to the development of CAPTI. There are specific strategies that are called out for our programs to take action on, and we've committed to, by commission action, we've committed to owning those changes in our guidelines. And I can say, in all honesty, I kind of to Naveen's point, I don't believe we've made any changes in our guidelines that will, I know Naveen's talking about that certain projects will not be considered ineligible. I think what you might be referring to, Melanie, is, they'll effectively be ineligible because they won't be able to compete. But I can say, if there's a project that's important to the Central Valley, that's important to SANCOG, and it has significant utility, and it's popular among the community, these are all valid valid attributes that I think would make a project competitive in cycle 1 or cycle 2 or cycle 3. So I don't mean to suggest that every project is still competitive in cycle 3 that would have been competitive in cycle 2. And I hear what you're saying, because the commission is very sensitive to that, and understanding that there have been significant investments on a lot of projects that have been in the works for quite some time, especially from our smaller, smaller and more rural agencies that, piece together funding for larger projects. We're still, confident that the guidelines for the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, and the Local Partnership Program all, provide an opportunity for every region to compete with a project, and across all modes. I still think that we can see on-system projects that are competitive in the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. But there will have to be maybe other areas in the evaluation criteria that those projects might have to excel. For instance, if they're not, and for instance, air quality and greenhouse gas emissions has been an evaluated criteria in this program since the first cycle. So I won't go too much further on that, but I don't, and if you want to have an additional discussion, I know my team met in an office hour. We're happy to sit down and chat with you and strategize. I know you also made the comment about the CMCP, and actually I'm glad that you raised your hand, because I have some additional feedback. Angel Pyle is the SB1 program manager at Caltrans, and her and I work very closely. We meet regularly, and I'm assuming you have a very close relationship with your Caltrans district office, but I can assure you that if corridor planning is a challenge monetarily or through staffing resources, Caltrans districts have planning teams that are more than willing to partner with their regions to take on corridor planning efforts. And I know it's easier said than done, especially from the commission, but I would absolutely encourage any agency who might be struggling with the corridor planning effort, to reach out to the commission, and we can try to point you to resources, but also utilize your Caltrain's district office, who in a lot of instances with successful CMCPs have a very close working relationship and provide a lot of the resources on the planning efforts. So not to segue off of your original comment with that, but I think that was some feedback I wanted to provide after hearing that comment earlier. So I'll stop there, but if Melanie has additional comments or questions, we're more than happy to continue the conversation, or even if Melanie wants to come off mute, and we can have a dialogue too.
Thanks, Matthew. I'm not seeing any further questions or comments or hands raised regarding her question.
Do we have any other comments, Kayla, by any chance?
Yes, so we do have a new question from Denise Arriaga.
Okay.
Can you please talk a little bit about how the other optional project information areas will be factored into project evaluation? Is it only for tiebreakers?
So again, while it's not an evaluation criteria, it's going to be kind of like all the other portions, all the other information you submit along with your project nomination, it will be considered as part of the project. So if your project does meets all of the evaluation criteria that are provided in the next set of guidelines, in the 2022 SCCP guidelines, and you have also been doing all of this great climate resilience work, for example, with your project, it's definitely an asset. It'll be considered. We want to be able to appreciate the work that you're doing and consider it. Again, but it's not evaluated, so we wouldn't be applying like a high or medium high or low rating of any sort to it. It'll just be something that's considered, if that makes sense. And Matthew, since you came on board, if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, no, and Naveen, you're directly on point, and Denise, I really appreciate the conversation. I just wanted to take an opportunity to say, these areas, which we're now including in the program nomination request, as Naveen said, they will not be evaluated, so your project will not be deemed, will not compete based on how you perform in these newer information areas. However, I think, as Josh mentioned in his remarks, some of these areas are being explored as evaluated in cycle 4 or in the future. So for one, we wanted to introduce these concepts within the realm of the SCCP program, as well as the other SB1 programs. For two, I'll be honest, as the Deputy Director for SB1 programming, I'm a huge advocate for SB1 as well as SB1 programming, and this additional information really helps the Commission tell a positive story about the types of projects that are competitive and are receiving funding. And so we'll, I know that that might not be, super valid for an applicant who may not, end up being successful in any given cycle where they provide that information to us. But when we do recommend a program of projects, we do want to demonstrate the positive, the benefits that the projects are providing, not just through the required performance metrics, but some of these additional areas as well. So one, it's kind of an introduction to considering these as evaluated down the road. But two, it's also because we're very eager to take a look at what our applicants are doing in this space in cycle 3 to kind of inform our decision making in cycle 4. So because it's not evaluated, I don't want any stakeholders to think that the information isn't, is just being provided for no purpose, and we're just asking our applicants to spend more time and resources on providing something to us. I can assure you this is very valuable information to the Commission, to my programming team, and to me. But it's just something that we're not to the point of saying we're going to start, evaluating it and determining projects based on it. So again, I have to probably talk way too much about it, but it's an important concept. We've been thinking about it all cycle. And I want to make sure that we have the buy-in from you, our stakeholders, because this is very important to us, and we know that it's very important to you all that are putting these projects together. So.
Thanks, Matthew. Denise did say thank you, that was helpful.
Great.
Naveen, it doesn't look like we have any more questions or comments or raised hands at the moment.
Okay, so I will move on to closing and next steps. If we can go to the next slide, Kayla. I think it's the one before this one. Okay, so to recap, today we discussed revisions to the CMCP requirements in the SCCP guidelines. The California Air Resources Board presented their recommendations for changes to the SCCP guidelines and explained their application review process, and I shared all the new guidelines additions and updates with you. As always, we'll post the workshop recording and this presentation on the Commission's website after the workshop, so please be on the lookout. I will reiterate Matthew's comment in the chat box below and apologize for the, the electronic misgivings of our website, I suppose. We apologize that you weren't able to access some of the reference documents, but they will be available online. Please do check back either later today or tomorrow. They should be accessible to you. And if they're not, you can just shoot me an email and I will send you a copy. And again, I apologize profusely for the, technical errors, I suppose. On the next slide, we're just gonna make a last call for any questions or comments that you may have, even general stuff. If you have thought of something that you want to add to the discussion, please let us know. I'll pause for a minute and see if anybody's interested in coming offline or sending in a comment. Wow, it's a really quiet crew today. I think it's like that Friday afternoon lull where you're just like gone for the day mentally. Or we're just that good with our guidelines and nobody has any problems with anything or questions, which is also great. Okay then, since there are no questions or comments at this time, I'm gonna go through our contact information. So for the latest Commission news and updates, you may visit our website and follow us on social media. If you have any general questions or comments, you can always email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov. For specific inquiries regarding this program or any SB1 program, you may contact us individually using the information provided here. We will do our best to respond as soon as possible. And by here, I meant the next slide, Kayla, sorry. This one, this is all of our contact information for me and for Matthew Yascott. You can reach out to us anytime. We'll do our best to respond as soon as we receive your inquiry. We're pretty good at communicating right back to you. So just let us know if you think of anything after the workshop. And then seeing no questions or comments outstanding, I am going to go ahead and thank you all for joining us today. We very much appreciate the constructive and informative discussion and feedback, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Hopefully, we are still conducting office hours. I know it's like mid-April and we're going to be closing them out at the end of April, but you can always reach out to us independently, request some time to chat with us. We love to hear from you. We love to talk to you. So just let us know. And I see Matthew has come off mute, so maybe he has some parting remarks as well.
No, yeah, just we appreciate all of your attention and feedback and work with us over the last several months. This is our last scheduled SCCP workshop. In line with what Naveen said, it is unfortunate that we weren't able to get the point in time draft working today. Naveen did have a point in time draft as of March posted, so hopefully you were able to review a lot of the up-to-date changes we've made, but because we weren't able to get the draft with the material we talked about today out publicly before this meeting, we will absolutely reserve the right to schedule an additional workshop if we have to, because we received comments on anything that we talked about today that might warrant an additional discussion or a need to bring a decision back for consensus with this group. So I just wanted to caveat that, we didn't want to miss the opportunity to let everybody have have a chance to review the guidelines and provide feedback. So we're hopeful that that everything we talked about today is good and copacetic with everybody, and that we don't need to schedule an additional workshop, but we will if we have to. So Naveen, great job today and through this whole first cycle as program manager, and I'll wish everybody a nice weekend and turn it back over to you, Naveen.
Thanks, Matthew. And just to add on to Matthew's final remark, this entire presentation that we've gone through today, all the comments from Bridget, from Matthew, from Josh, it's all been recorded and it's going to be posted online. And if you just go to the Commission's website and visit our workshops page, like Matthew said, you go down to the past workshops and you will come up on the April 15th SCCP workshop links, and all of those links will be posted there along with this presentation. So if you do want to reference back to the discussion we had today, when you have your working reference documents, by all means, we do invite you to do so. If you do think of any questions or any comments at all afterwards, please shoot me an email or give me a call or shoot me a text even, and I will be more than happy to respond and get back to you as soon as possible. It has been such a great time getting to know you all through these workshops and hearing from you and hearing your feedback and input. And I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversation. So I hope you have a really great afternoon and an excellent weekend. Kayla, I think we can go ahead and end the webinar stream. Thank you very much.